Welcome to Life Stories. Imagine discovering that the person you've loved most in the world, the one you thought was perfect, has been hiding a secret that could shatter everything you believed about them. What if the person you thought you knew best wasn't the hero of your story, but rather a part of a much darker truth? This is the story of a man who thought he had it all: love, family, and a bright future, only to find himself standing on the edge of everything he thought was true. What happens when the past comes crashing into your present and everything you once trusted is suddenly up for question? Stay with us as we take you through a journey of love, betrayal, and the harsh realities of uncovering the truth. Let's begin. John had always believed in the idea of a perfect family. Growing up, his mother, Emily, had been the heart and soul of his life. She taught him about kindness, generosity, and strength, values that were deeply ingrained in him. When he met Sarah, it felt like a dream. They clicked instantly at a mutual friend's cookout. Her smile, her quick wit, the way she made everything feel so effortless. It felt like fate. He didn't hesitate when he proposed, thinking he was not only marrying her, but also becoming part of a family that would bring him joy and connection. Little did he know that this dream would soon unravel into a nightmare. Sarah's parents, Bill and Karen, were something else entirely. At first, John had brushed off their rude remarks about his modest upbringing, thinking it was just their way of trying to fit in with him. They were loud, opinionated, and seemed to take every opportunity to remind him that he was somehow not enough. He kept quiet, convincing himself that love could overcome these small but sharp jabs. But as time passed, their subtle insults piled up, cutting deeper than he realized. The constant comments from Karen about his working class roots and Bill's snide remarks about how lucky Sarah was to upgrade her life by marrying him stung. Yet John remained silent, always swallowing his pride for the sake of keeping the peace. What he hadn't realized was that these slights were not the worst part. The real tension lay with Sarah herself. She seemed to be caught between her love for him and the unspoken loyalty to her parents. She laughed at their jabs. She didn't defend him when they crossed the line. And when it came to the memory of his mother, Emily, Sarah's indifference pierced John's heart more than any insult. Emily had always been the kind of woman who gave without expecting anything in return. She had gone out of her way to help Sarah's family when their restaurant was failing, co-signing loans, covering debts, and even helping to pay for tuition when Sarah's brother Ryan couldn't afford his last semester in college. Emily had done all this quietly, without ever asking for acknowledgement. Yet, all Sarah could muster when John tried to bring up his mother was a dismissive, "She's too involved." The sting was subtle, but it never left. The breaking point came when John suggested a small tribute to his late mother during their wedding vows. Sarah's response was colder than he expected. "Isn't that going to make people sad? Weddings are supposed to be happy." John felt the betrayal in that moment, the final nail in a coffin that had been slowly closing over the past few months. But he didn't say anything. Not yet. Then came the rehearsal dinner. Bill and Karen insisted on hosting it at a high-end restaurant they had ties to, making sure everyone knew it was their grand gesture. John had never felt more out of place. The dinner, designed to celebrate his future, felt more like a spectacle created to boost Bill and Karen's egos. He tried to ignore the subtle digs, the way Karen would make little comments about how fancy everything was compared to his humble background. But as the night wore on, it became clear that this wasn't just about the dinner. It was about their need to be seen, to remind everyone that they were important. And as usual, Sarah did nothing to stop it. When the speeches started, John knew something was wrong. Bill, as expected, took the microphone first. He cleared his throat and started with a tone that made John's skin crawl. "Tonight is about celebrating the union of two families. Sarah, and of course, John," Bill said, his voice dripping with condescension as he pronounced John's name like it was a bad taste in his mouth. "Sarah's always been a high achiever, and now she's marrying someone who will keep her grounded." Bill's words were laced with passive aggression, a clear message that Sarah was settling for John. John clenched his jaw, doing his best to keep it together. Next, Karen took the mic. Her speech began in a familiar way, extolling Sarah's virtues, but then came the thinly veiled insults aimed at John. She talked about how patient Sarah was, how she taught John so much already, her tone implying that he was somehow beneath Sarah. John's blood boiled, but he stayed silent, knowing that he was already too deep into this engagement to back out. Or so he thought. Then came the moment that it would change everything. Bill raised the mic once again, his face smug as he began to speak of Emily. And of course, let's not forget someone who played a big role in shaping who John is. His mother, Emily, Bill said, his words dripping with mockery. He chuckled and added, she was one of a kind, always meddling, always getting involved. Karen joined in, laughing, as they both turned Emily's kindness into a joke. John's face burned with rage, but it wasn't just their disrespect that cut the deepest. It was Sarah's reaction. She laughed along with them. She didn't stop them. She didn't even seem to care. In that moment, John felt like the world had stopped. He had loved this woman. He had trusted her, believed that together they would build a life based on respect, love, and the values his mother had taught him. But now, as he looked at her, he realized she was complicit in the very thing that had hurt him most. She had allowed them to mock his mother's memory without a single word of protest. His heart shattered. "Are you serious right now?" John said, his voice shaking with fury. The room went dead silent. His fists clenched under the table, but he knew what he had to do. Standing up, he looked directly at Bill and Karen, his voice steady but full of emotion. "You mocked my mother, the woman who helped you when you had nothing, and now you sit here laughing about it like it's all a joke." His words hung in the air, the room too stunned to speak. But when Lydia didn't speak up, when she didn't defend him, something inside him snapped. Without another word, John turned to Lydia. "This wedding is off." The gasps from the room were immediate, but John didn't care. He was done. What happens when the people you love most let you down? Can you ever go back from that kind of betrayal? John walked out of the restaurant, his heart pounding, but the relief in his chest was undeniable. The pain of the past months melted away with every step. But as the door slammed behind him, one thing was clear. This was only the beginning. As the fallout from his decision unfolded, John would have to face the painful truth about the woman he thought he was marrying and the man he thought he had become. But as he walked away, he couldn't shake the question. Was he really done? Or was the real test still to come? The days that followed John's dramatic exit from the rehearsal dinner felt like they were moving in slow motion. At first, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had done the right thing. He had stood up for his mother, for himself, and for everything he had believed in. Yet, there was a gnawing emptiness that kept him up at night, a whisper in his mind that said he wasn't finished yet. He had walked away from Lydia and her family, but something deep inside him told him that the real fight was just beginning. The messages started flooding in that night. Lydia's desperate texts filled with apologies, Jack's furious ones, and Karen's tearful, self-pitying words. They all seemed so empty to him, their words a hollow echo of the real pain he had felt. But it was Lydia's message that haunted him the most. "Please, John, I'm sorry. I didn't know how to stop them. I was scared. Please, let's talk." He had wanted to ignore it. He wanted to be done with her, to let her and her family fade into the background of his life, but he couldn't. Every time he tried to forget her, to push the memory of her out of his mind, he would remember the way she smiled, the way she had once held him in the darkest moments of his grief. He remembered the way they had laughed together, how their future had seemed so bright, but now everything about that future felt like a lie. The next morning, when Lydia showed up at his apartment, standing at his door with red eyes and the weight of the night before still clinging to her, John felt a bitter ache in his chest. He had always been able to read her, to know when she was genuinely sorry. But this time was different. This time, he couldn't trust her words. Not anymore. She stood there trembling, her voice barely above a whisper. John, please, can we just talk? I didn't mean to hurt you. I swear I thought I could make everything better. But I'm not perfect. I'm so sorry. John looked at her, his heart heavy. The woman standing in front of him wasn't the same person he had fallen in love with. This woman was fractured, broken by her own actions, and he could feel it in his bones. He wanted to comfort her, to tell her everything would be okay, but he knew better now. He knew that sometimes love wasn't enough to make things right. I don't know if I can forgive you, he said softly, his voice cracking. You allowed your parents to mock my mother, the one person who always had your back, the one person who believed in your family when no one else did. How could you laugh at that? How could you let them do that to me? Lydia's face crumpled, and her hands clenched into fists at her sides. I didn't want to disappoint them, John. I didn't know what to do. They're my parents. I thought if I didn't go along with them, everything would fall apart. I never thought it would be like this. John's anger flared, but it was mixed with a deep sadness that he could no longer hide. He stepped back, his hand gripping the doorframe. You chose them over me, Lydia. You chose them over the person who loved you. You didn't defend my mother, and you didn't defend me. You were complicit. And now you're asking me to just forget all of it? The words stung more than he had intended, but they were the truth. And deep down, he knew that if he didn't say them now, he would regret it forever. Lydia's face twisted in pain, her eyes filled with regret, but it wasn't enough to make him change his mind. Not this time. Lydia sank down onto the doorstep, her head buried in her hands. What do you want from me, John? She sobbed. What can I do to fix this? What can I possibly do to make it right? John looked at her, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He wanted to walk away. He wanted to leave everything behind. But there was something inside of him, something dark and heavy, that kept pulling him back. I don't know if anything can fix this, he muttered, but I know I can't keep living in a lie. Not with you, not with them. I can't just pretend everything's okay when it isn't. He took a step back and closed the door slowly, the finality of it echoing in his chest. For a moment, he stood there, staring at the door as if he could will the past to rewrite itself. But nothing changed. The following days passed in a blur. John threw himself into work, into anything that would distract him from the chaos he had left behind. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lydia's face, tear-streaked and desperate for forgiveness. And every time he remembered the way she had allowed her parents to destroy his mother's memory, it felt like a knife twisting deeper into his soul. And then, just when he thought he couldn't be shocked any further, a letter arrived. It wasn't a letter from Lydia. It wasn't from anyone he knew. The handwriting was unfamiliar, the envelope heavy with the promise of something he wasn't prepared for. He hesitated, his heart pounding in his chest as he ripped it open. The letter inside was short, the words simple but chilling. John, I know what happened at the dinner hurt you, but there's something you don't know. Something you need to hear. Before you make any decisions, you need to know the truth about your mother. The truth about what she really did for us. Meet me, tomorrow night, 8 p.m. You need to hear this. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. What truth? What could possibly change everything he thought he knew about his mother, about his life, and about the family he was supposed to be marrying into? How far would you go to uncover a truth that could shatter everything you believed in? Can you ever really know someone completely, even the people you trust the most? John stared at the letter, his mind racing. He didn't want to go, didn't want to open that door, but something deep inside him told him he had no choice. The truth was out there, and whether he was ready for it or not, he was going to find it. John stood in the dimly lit street, the letter clenched tightly in his hand. The words still echoed in his mind, twisting and turning with each passing second. The truth about your mother. You need to hear this. He didn't know what to think. The invitation was clear. Meet someone at 8 p.m., someone who claimed to hold the key to everything that had shattered his world. But what if it was a trap? What if it was another attempt to manipulate him into forgiving Lydia and her family? The night felt colder than usual as John made his way to the address on the letter. The streets were eerily quiet, almost as if the city itself was holding its breath. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into something he wasn't ready to face. The closer he got, the more his heart raced, not just with fear, but with anticipation. What could this mysterious person reveal that could change everything? He arrived at the address, an old building tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. The door was cracked open, the dim glow of a single lamp spilling onto the street. He knocked, his breath coming in short bursts, his mind battling the conflicting emotions swirling inside him. After a moment, the door creaked open, and a man stepped into view. John didn't recognize him. But there was something familiar about his presence, something that made John's stomach tighten. "You came," the man said, his voice deep but gentle. "Good. I wasn't sure you would." John didn't answer right away. He just stood there, looking the man up and down, searching for some sign, some clue as to who he was. He couldn't help but feel like this was a step into the unknown, one that might cost him everything he thought he knew about his mother, his family, and his life. "Who are you?" John finally asked, his voice steady but wary. "I'm someone who knew your mother," the man replied, stepping aside to let him in. "I knew her better than you think." John froze. The words hit him like a punch to the chest. "Better than I think?" His mother had been everything to him. She had been the rock that held his world together, the woman who had given everything for those she loved. How could anyone know her better than him? "Come in," the man said, as if reading John's mind. "There's something you need to understand." John stepped inside, the faint smell of old books and wood filling the air. The room was small but cozy, filled with mismatched furniture and pictures on the walls. At first glance, it looked like nothing special, but something about it made John feel uneasy. The man motioned for him to sit down across from a worn-out couch, his eyes never leaving John's face. "Your mother was a remarkable woman, John," the man began. "She helped people in ways no one would ever expect, but there was something more to her than you knew, something that she never shared with you." John sat there, unable to speak, his mind racing. What could possibly be more than what I already knew? The man reached for a small box on the table beside him and opened it slowly, as if revealing something sacred. Inside was an old photograph, one John had never seen before. It was a picture of his mother, but she wasn't alone. She was standing beside a younger version of Bill and Karen, her arms around both of them, smiling as if they were family. John's breath caught in his throat. He stared at the photograph, trying to make sense of it. "What is this?" he asked, his voice shaking. The man sighed. "Your mother didn't just help your future in-laws out of kindness, John. She was a part of their lives long before you ever met Sarah." John's head spun. "What do you mean?" He felt like the ground was slipping beneath him. His mind couldn't process what he was hearing. His mother, the woman who had always been there for him, had been involved with Bill and Karen in a way he never imagined. How could she have kept this from him? How could they have hidden this from him? The man continued, his voice soft, but the weight of his words crushed John's heart. Bill and Karen didn't just owe her for saving their restaurant, for helping their son with tuition. They owed her for saving them, for giving them a second chance when they're about to lose everything. Your mother was the one who brought them together, and she did it because she saw something in them. She believed in them. But somewhere along the way, she became too much for them. They took her help and turned it into something else. John was silent, the shock overwhelming him. His mother had been selfless, generous, and now he was learning that she had been more than just a caregiver. She had been entangled in a relationship with Bill and Karen that went far deeper than he ever realized. But why hadn't she told him? Why had she kept this from him? The man looked at him with a kind of understanding, as if he had known this moment would come. "She didn't tell you, John, because she didn't want you to carry the burden of her decisions. She did what she did out of love, but she also knew the price of that love. She knew how it would turn out. John's mind was racing, trying to piece together the fragments of this new reality. His mother, the woman who had loved him so unconditionally, had been caught in a web of deceit, manipulation, and unspoken debts. He had always seen her as a saint, but now he was seeing the cracks in the image he had built of her. The man stood up, his hands shaking slightly as he closed the box. "I'm sorry to bring this to you, but you needed to know the truth. Your mother was a hero, but even heroes have their flaws. She did what she thought was right, but the cost was more than she could handle alone." John sat there, his emotions raw, his chest tight with grief and anger. His mother had been human, after all. She had made choices, and those choices had consequences. Consequences he was only beginning to understand. When he left the building, the night felt colder than before. The weight of the truth pressed down on him like an anchor, dragging him under. As he walked through the empty streets, he realized that the person he had been before, naive, hopeful, was gone. In its place was someone who understood that even the people we love most aren't perfect. And when he finally reached his apartment, he realized that the answer wasn't about forgiveness. It wasn't about giving in to Sarah's apologies or the weight of her family's influence. It was about accepting the truth, no matter how painful it was. His mother had loved him, yes. But now, it was time for him to love himself enough to walk away from the past that had held him back. What do you think about the secret that John uncovered about his mother? Does it change how you see the character of his mother, or does it make you feel more empathetic toward her? If you like this story, type 100 in the comments. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to share this story with your friends, and thank you for watching Life Stories.